The moment for private communication passes. The implementation teams deploy within the hour. She announces the webway restructuring approaches the predicted threshold for maximum effectiveness of our countermeasures. My master inclines his head in acknowledgement. The technical solutions are optimal given the constraints. Success cannot be guaranteed, but probability favors positive outcomes for the specified junction points. Excellent. Lady Malice turns her attention to Kell. The temporal anomaly has provided invaluable insight. Its continued functionality, despite exposure to the failsafe activation, exceeds all projections. The modifications were designed for adaptability under extreme conditions, my master notes with professional pride. Though the specific manifestation of temporal desynchronization was unanticipated, after the implementation, we will discuss terms for transferring ownership of the specimen to my cabal. Lady Molly states, its unique perspective will prove valuable in navigating the reshaped webway configuration. My master shows no outward reaction to this presumption, though I detect subtle harmonics of displeasure in his voice as he responds, "As you wish, Lady Malice." Though its long-term stability remains questionable given the progressive nature of the temporal desynchronization. The final preparations conclude. The implementation teams depart for their assigned webway junctions equipped with the technical solutions developed under the Homunul's guidance. Lady Malice accompanies the primary team, her personal oversight emphasizing the critical importance of the operation. In the suddenly quieter preparation chamber, my master confers with the other senior Homunuli. Their voices are low, their archaic dialect more obscure than usual, but my enhanced hearing catches fragments of their exchange. Temporary alliance of necessity only, one comments. Once the critical period passes, reassessment of alignment is essential. Agreed, my master responds. The poison tongue offers protection now, but Vex retaliation will be calculated once the webway restructuring stabilizes. And the temporal anomaly asks the third homunulus. Its value increases with each manifestation of new perceptual capabilities. It returns to our coven, my master states firmly. Lady Malice's presumption of ownership is premature and misguided. Their conversation continues, focusing on strategies for navigating the political aftermath of the disjunction. I maintain my assigned tasks, giving no indication that I have overheard their exchange. Kell remains in the specialized containment field designed to stabilize his increasingly erratic temporal synchronization. His modified eyes track movements throughout the chamber, sometimes focusing on events slightly before they occur, reacting to actions not yet taken. Time passes. The implementation teams report initial successes at several webway junctions. The countermeasures appear to be functioning as designed, preserving connections vital to the poison tongue cabal while allowing others to close according to the ancient Phalafes programming. Just as Kell predicted, a cascade of system failures throughout the facility. Lighting fluctuates. Containment fields destabilize momentarily before emergency systems engage. Communication networks experience distortion and interruption. The Homunuli respond immediately, activating personal protection devices, issuing commands to stabilize critical systems. The remaining incubi move into defensive positions, claves ready against potential threats. Technical adepts rush to restore full functionality to affected systems. Amid the controlled chaos, Kell's containment field fails completely. He steps free, moving with that strange fluidity that suggests existence across multiple temporal states simultaneously. The incubi react instantly, weapons orienting toward the unexpected threat. But Kell does not attack. Instead, he approaches me with deliberate purpose. "Now, Draven," he says, voice creating harmonics that seem to exist slightly out of phase with reality itself. The moment of choice. The senior Homunuli turn their attention to the escaped specimen, already activating devices to restrain or neutralize him if necessary. My master's eyes narrow as he observes the interaction, calculating implications and responses. "What choice?" I ask, maintaining the appearance of the loyal rack while positioning myself between Kel and the immediate threat of the incubi. To remain a tool or to become a player, Kel responds. To serve others' ambitions or to pursue your own. The disjunction creates possibilities outside established hierarchies, paths not previously accessible. My master approaches, his ancient form moving with the deliberate precision of a predator assessing potential prey. The temporal anomaly experiences increased desynchronization. He observes its cognitive processes fragment across multiple timelines. Fascinating, but ultimately unstable. Not unstable, Kel corrects. Evolved perception freed from linear constraint. I see the patterns now. The cycles of predation and submission that define this place, and the potential for something different. Restrain the specimen, my master instructs me. Its value remains significant despite the cognitive deterioration, the moment of choice, as Kel named it. To obey, as I have since my transformation from human captive to rack, or to act according to my own calculated interest in this moment of unprecedented instability. The disjunction has reshaped not just the webway connections that sustain Commorragh, but the power structures that define existence within the Dark City. Cables rise and fall based on their access to real space raiding routes. Covens gain or lose influence based on their alliances with ascendant or declining houses, and in such fluid circumstances, even a rack might navigate to an improved position. The specimen's temporal perception may offer unique advantages during the transition period. I suggest to my master neither directly obeying nor openly defying. Its instability could be directed rather than simply contained. My master pauses, calculates, and elaborates. The countermeasures implemented at the webway junctions preserve specific connections while allowing others to close. But the specimen perceives across multiple temporal states. Simultaneously, it may identify additional opportunities for advantageous manipulation beyond those prioritized by the poisoned tongue cabal. Opportunities that would benefit our coven specifically, my master concludes, following my implication, independent of Lady Malice's interests. Precisely, master. The other senior homunuli exchange glances, recognizing the potential value in this approach. The incubi maintained their ready stance, awaiting clear threat before acting without direct orders from their absent mistress. A calculated risk, my master acknowledges, but potentially worthwhile given the unique circumstances of the disjunction. He turns to the other homunuli. We must act quickly before Lady Malice returns. The temporal anomaly may provide insights that secure our position regardless of which KBBL emerges dominant from the restructuring. Agreement is reached. The senior homunuli activate personal transportation devices, preparing to return to their coven territories with the valuable specimen. My master gestures for me to secure Kel for transport. As I approach him, Kel speaks in subharmonics, pitched for my hearing alone. Not their tool, not their specimen. The disjunction offers more than repositioning within the same corrupt system. The incubi, detecting the unauthorized preparation for departure, move to intervene. The specimen remains under Lady Malice's protection, their leader states. It does not leave this facility without her explicit authorization. Conflict becomes inevitable. The Hanuli activate defensive systems built into their grotesquely modified forms. The incubi assume combat stances, claves humming with lethal energy, and in this moment of impending violence, a third option emerges in my calculations. Neither loyalty to my master nor submission to Lady Malice's authority, but a path aligned with Kel's cryptic suggestions. A path that exploits the unique instabilities of the disjunction for personal advancement beyond the limitations of my assigned parole. I move with the efficiency granted by my extensive modifications, activating a sequence on the nearest control panel. Emergency containment protocols engage, creating localized stasis fields that immobilize both the homunuli and the incubi. Caught by surprise at this unexpected action from a mere rack. "What are you doing?" my master demands, his ancient form struggling against the stasis effect. "Release us immediately." Adaptation, Master, I responded. The differential title is now ironic rather than genuine. As you taught me, survival necessitates adaptation to changing circumstances. Kel watches with those strange, temporally desynchronized eyes, seeing this moment perhaps across multiple potential timelines simultaneously. The cascade continues, he observes. Systems throughout Commorragh fail as the webway restructuring reaches a critical threshold. Opportunities manifest for those prepared to recognize them. I access the facility's central control systems, leveraging the technical knowledge accumulated throughout my service to the Homunuli Covens. The disjunction has created vulnerabilities in security protocols throughout Commorragh, and this facility is no exception. Within moments, I have command of essential functions, from containment fields to communication networks. This defiance is illogical, my master argues, still calculating how to regain control of the situation. Your value derives from your association with our coven. Without that protection, you are merely another modified specimen in a city of predators. Perhaps I acknowledge, but the disjunction creates new equations of value and vulnerability, and I have calculated my position with care. I activate the communication system, establishing connection with Lady Malice's personal channel. Her image appears, expression shifting from irritation at the interruption to calculation as she assesses the unexpected situation. Interesting, she observes, taking in the immobilized Homunuli and incubi. The rack demonstrates initiative beyond its programming. The Homunuli plan to depart with the temporal anomaly, I inform her, to exploit its unique perception for their exclusive advantage during the webway restructuring. Predictably, Lady Malice responds dismissively. Their ambition is as consistent as their underestimation of my anticipation. And now you secure them and contact me directly. For what purpose? Negotiation. I state simply the temporal anomaly offers unique advantages during this transition period. Advantages. I am positioned to help you maximize, having worked intimately with both the specimen and the countermeasure development. Lady Malice studies me with the predatory assessment of one who has navigated the lethal politics of Commorragh for millennia, and your terms. Recognition of elevated status, protection during the transition period, access to resources for continued modification according to my own design rather than imposed templates. Ambitious for Iraq, she notes, neither accepting nor rejecting outright. The disjunction redeefs what is possible. I counter those who adapt to new realities and prosper. Those who cling to old hierarchies find themselves isolated as the webway restructures, a calculated appeal to her current priorities. Lady Malice's entire strategy revolves around adaptation to the changing webway configuration, preserving Cabal's position despite Vex's attempt to isolate her power base. You offer control of the temporal anomaly and the expertise to utilize its unique perspective. She summarizes in exchange for elevation from tool to asset in my service. Precisely. My master hisses from within the stasis field. The rack betrays millennia of investment and development for momentary advantage. Its calculation is flawed. Lady Malice will use its knowledge and discard it once the critical period passes. Perhaps Lady Malice acknowledges with cruel amusement. Or perhaps adaptability and initiative deserve reward, particularly during times of such magnificent opportunity. The disjunction reshapes more than just the webway. After all, it redefines the very nature of value in our society. Her attention returns to me. Maintain control of the facility. Secure the temporal anomaly for transport. I return within the hour to complete our arrangement personally. The communication ends. I have committed fully now to this new path, betraying my master for the possibility of advancement under Lady Malice's protection. A calculated risk, but one aligned with the fundamental principle of survival that has guided me since my transformation from human captive to rack. Kel approaches, moving through the space between the immobilized Homunuli and incubi. Choice made, he observes, but incomplete. Lady Malice offers advancement within the same system of predation, a different master, not freedom from mastery. True freedom is an illusion in Commorragh, I respond. Advancement within the system is the realistic objective, realistic for those who perceive linearly. Kel counters, the terminus Horge revealed alternatives beyond conventional calculation. Paths that intersect the restructuring webway in ways neither Vect nor Malice has anticipated. My master laughs from within the stasis field, the sound distorted, but still carrying the weight of ancient cruelty. The temporal anomaly offers metaphysical delusions as strategy, proof of its cognitive deterioration. Kel ignores the taunt, focusing entirely on me. The webway restructuring creates temporary bridges to realms normally inaccessible from Commorragh, paths that will exist briefly during the peak instability, then close permanently as the new configuration stabilizes. What realms, I ask? Curiosity overriding caution? Places beyond Drukhari dominion, beyond the reach of she who thirsts. Places where the rigid definitions of identity that constrain existence here become fluid. The implication is staggering. Escape from Commorragh itself, not merely advancement within the hierarchies of the Dark City, but departure from its fundamental systems of predation and submission, a possibility I had calculated as so remote as to be effectively impossible. Such paths would be detected by the cabals, I observe, secured or destroyed rather than left accessible. They exist in temporal flux, Kel explains, perceivable only to those who experience time non-linearly, invisible to conventional sensors and predictive models. The terminus horror loge did not simply alter my perception, it synchronized me with the underlying temporal architecture of the webway itself. A dangerous proposition. Even if such paths exist, attempting to access them means abandoning the calculated advantage of alignment with Lady Males, exchanging a tangible improvement in status for a theoretical possibility of escape that depends entirely on the testimony of a being whose mind has been altered by exposure to ancient and barely understood technology. Lady Malice returns within the hour. I note the opportunity for alternative action is limited. Time is subjective, Kel responds, particularly now as the disjunction reaches peak instability. What constitutes an hour in baseline perception may contain multiple decision points across parallel temporal streams. My master interjects, his voice carrying tones of manipulative reason. The rack calculates probabilities as it was designed to do. The tangible advantage of elevation under Kabbalite protection against the insubstantial promise of impossible escape. The rational choice is obvious. Rationality depends on initial assumptions. Kel counters on definitions of value and possibility conditioned by existing power structures. The terminus Horrige revealed the artificial nature of those constraints. I consider the opposing perspectives, calculating rapidly as time progresses toward Lady Malice's return. Stasis fields will not hold the Honkuli indefinitely. The facility systems remain compromised by the cascade failures spreading throughout Commorragh. Decision points narrow with each passing moment. If such paths exist, I ask Kel directly, where do they lead? Not where, when. The restructuring creates bridges across time as well as space, connections to periods before the current configuration of power solidified, before certain choices became effectively irrevocable. Speak plainly, I demand. A path exists that intersects with the time shortly after your initial capture, before the modifications that integrated you into the Honuli systems, a junction point where alternate trajectories become possible. The implication freezes my thoughts momentarily, a path back to a point where I was still fundamentally human. Before the surgical alterations, the neural rewiring, the systematic erosion of identity through pain and conditioning. Impossible, my master hisses. The temporal anomaly describes time travel, a theoretical absurdity, further proof of cognitive fragmentation, not travel. Kel corrects intersections. Acts. The webway exists partially outside conventional space-time. The restructuring creates temporary alignments between points normally separated by impermeable boundaries. I access the facility's monitoring systems, checking the progression of the disjunction throughout Commorragh. The data confirms unprecedented instability in the webway network, reality distortions manifesting in patterns never before recorded, temporal anomalies reported in multiple sectors, particularly those nearest the locations where the ancient fail-safes were activated. If Kell speaks truth, the opportunity is unique, unrepeatable, available only during this singular convergence of circumstances engineered across millennia. How do we access such a path? I ask for decisions crystallizing even as I form the question. The facility contains a secondary webway portal. Kell responds, maintained by the Poison Tongue for emergency evacuation. Its control systems are affected by the cascade failures. Recalibration to the specific temporal frequency is possible for someone with your technical knowledge. My master recognizes the shift in my calculation. You risk everything on the delusion of a temporally fractured mind. He warns, even if such a path exists, you are no longer what you were. The modifications are irreversible. You cannot simply return to humanity. Perhaps not completely, I acknowledge, but the choice of what to become next need not be dictated by the hierarchies of Commorragh. I access the facility's schematics, locating the secondary webway portal. It exists, as Kell described, a small but functional gateway maintained for the personal use of Lady Malice and her inner circle. Currently offline due to the cascade failures affecting systems throughout the facility. The portal requires recalibration and reactivation. I observe the process will take time and will be detected by monitoring systems still operational throughout the Cabal territory. Time is relative during peak instability, Kell reminds me, and detection depends on conventional observation parameters. We exist temporarily outside those constraints, a decision point commitment to a course with no certainty of success based on the testimony of a being altered by exposure to ancient technology. Against the tangible but limited advancement offered by allegiance to Lady Malice in the new configuration of power emerging from the disjunction. I choose. Guard the homunuli and incubi. I instruct Kell. The stasis fields will destabilize as I divert power to the portal systems. They cannot perceive me correctly while I maintain temporal desynchronization. Kell assures me. Their reactions will target where I appear to be rather than where I exist. I move quickly to the portal control systems, leveraging my technical knowledge gained through years of service in the homunuli laboratories. The cascade failures have disrupted normal operation, but the fundamental architecture remains intact. Recalibration requires understanding of webway mechanics beyond standard rack training. But my unique position as intermediary between the homunuli and their human subjects has granted me access to knowledge typically restricted. The rack betrays its nature. My master calls from the stasis field, which has begun to fluctuate as I redirect power. The modifications that make you valuable will become your prison outside Commorragh. The pain suppression, the neural enhancements, all require specialized maintenance. Only the homunuli can provide. Adaptation continues beyond your controlled environment. I respond, not pausing in my work. As you taught me, survival necessitates evolution. The portal systems respond to my adjustments. Power builds in the activation matrix as I calibrate to the temporal frequency Kell has specified. Reality distorts around the portal frame, the air shimmering with energies that reflect the fundamental instability of the webway during peak disjunction. Alarms activate throughout the facility. The unauthorized portal activation has triggered security protocols still functioning despite the cascade failures. Lady Malice will be notified immediately. Her return will accelerate. The window of opportunity narrows. I inform Kell. Final calibration sequence initiating. The stasis fields containing the homunuli and incubi collapse completely as the last power reserves are diverted to the portal activation. They recover quickly. Ancient reflexes and combat training overcoming momentary disorientation. Stop the rack. My master commands the incubi. The temporal anomaly must be contained. Both are vital assets Lady Malice requires. The incubi hesitate briefly, caught between conflicting imperatives. Their loyalty to Lady Malice demands they prevent unauthorized use of the emergency portal. But my earlier communication with their mistress suggested a new arrangement that placed me under her protection. The hesitation ends as the senior incubi assesses priorities. Secure the portal, he orders his warriors. Neutralize all threats to Cabal assets. They move with lethal grace, claves humming with energy that can slice through even homunuli modifications with ease. The senior homunuli activate defensive systems built into their grotesquely modified forms, preparing to recapture both me and Kel as valuable property. Kel intercepts the advancing threats, moving with that strange temporal fluidity that places him slightly out of phase with conventional reality. The incubi strike with perfect form, but their blades pass through space as Kel occupied milliseconds before or will occupy milliseconds later. The portal stabilizes, I announce, completing the final calibration. The gateway pulses with energies unlike any standard webway activation, colors that hurt the mind to perceive ripple across its surface. Temporal distortions create echo images of the portal as it exists across multiple states simultaneously. Quickly, Kel urges, still moving between the strikes of the increasingly frustrated incubi. The intersection point exists briefly during peak instability. Once the webway restructuring passes a critical threshold, the path closes permanently. My master approaches from another angle. Ancient form gliding with the deceptive speed of a being who has evolved over millennia of predatory existence. Consider the rationality of your choice. He appeals one final time. Even if this theoretical path exists, you abandon certain advantages for desperate uncertainty. Certainty is an illusion in a city built on betrayal, I respond. Adaptation means recognizing when the parameters of calculation have fundamentally changed. The portal reaches full activation, the gateway stabilizing despite the temporal distortions. Through its surface, I glimpse fragments of realities in flux, pathways that shimmer and shift as the webway restructures according to programs set in motion at the time of the fall. Kel disengages from the incubi with a final display of temporal desynchronization that leaves them striking after images. He moves to join me at the portal threshold. The path exists as I perceived it, he confirms. Intersection with the temporal point shortly after your initial capture before the modifications that defined your existence here. A proximity alert sounds. Lady Malice approaches the facility, her personal transport moving at maximum speed minutes at most before her arrival. Once we cross, there is no return. I note Commorragh will become inaccessible as the webway restructuring completes. One path ends, others begin. Kel responds. Adaptation continues beyond the Dark City. My master makes a final attempt to prevent our departure, activating a stasis projector built into his modified form. The field envelops me partially, slowing movement, creating the familiar sensation of time stretching beyond normal perception. But unlike previous experiences with such technology, I find my consciousness adapting rather than succumbing. Perhaps Kel's temporal desynchronization has affected me through proximity. Perhaps my own modifications have evolved beyond their intended parameters. Whatever the cause, I maintain awareness and limited mobility despite the stasis effect. Fascinating. My master observes with clinical detachment even as he attempts to halt my escape. The rack demonstrates adaptive capability beyond design specifications. Further evidence of the value you abandon through this irrational choice, not abandonment, I correct. Fighting through the stasis effect with growing strength, transformation. As you taught me, through pain and modification, evolution through challenge. With supreme effort, I break free of the stasis field, the energy dispersing in patterns that reflect the temporal distortions affecting the facility. My master's expression shifts from clinical interest to something approaching respect. Perhaps you were more successful in experiment than intended, he acknowledges. Go then. Evolution demands testing boundaries. This unexpected concession momentarily disrupts my calculation. Is it genuine recognition of my demonstrated capability? Or a final manipulation, a way to claim credit for my defiance as proof of his experimental success? No time to analyze further. The portal destabilizes as the webway restructuring approaches the final threshold. The path Kel described will close permanently within moments. Now, Kel urges, the intersection point manifests optimally. Together we step through the gateway, leaving behind Himanuli, the incubi, my master, and the approaching Lady Malice, leaving behind Commorragh itself as the disjunction reshapes the Dark City according to plans set in motion millennia ago. The sensation defies description, not the familiar transition of standard webway travel, but a fracturing of perception itself. My consciousness seems to separate into multiple streams, each experiencing a different potential timeline simultaneously. I see versions of myself that never existed, paths not taken, choices unmade. Through this kaleidoscope of possibility, one reality gradually solidifies, a temporal intersection point as Kel described. The period shortly after my initial capture by the Dark Eldar. Before the modifications that transformed me from human captive to rack, we emerge into a shadowed corner of Commorragh. Unlike the city we left, similar in its fundamental architecture of cruelty, but lacking specific structures that developed later. The air tastes different. The ambient suffering is less concentrated. The Dark City as it existed years before the disjunction. Temporal intersection achieved. Kel confirms his form is still fluctuating slightly with desynchronization effects. The Dark City restructuring completes in the timeline we departed. The path closes permanently behind us. I take stock of our situation. We have arrived in Commorragh in the past, but not escaped it entirely. Still within the Dark City, still surrounded by predatory beings who would view us as either prey or useful specimens. We have traveled back in time, but remain in the Dark City, I observe. Our escape is incomplete. The intersection point is not the destination, but the junction, Kel explains. From here, paths exist that were closed in our original timeline. The slave pens where you were initially held connect to multiple sub-branches of the webway, including routes the Dark Eldar have not fully secured. You can perceive these paths. Yes, temporal desynchronization allows me to see connections invisible to conventional perception. Pathways temporarily accessible before the Dark Eldar complete certain security protocols they implemented in the timeline we departed. A plan forms, not escape to some idealized freedom, but navigation to spaces with fewer constraints, movement from absolute captivity to relative autonomy. We must reach the slave pens without detection. I note my earlier self would be held there at this temporal point. Not only detection, we must avoid Kel cautions. Temporal paradox as well. Direct interaction with your past self could create instabilities in an already fragile intersection point. Then we move carefully, utilizing our knowledge of Commorragh's architecture and protocols to remain undetected. We proceed through the shadowed undercity of ancient Commorragh, avoiding the main thoroughfares. Utilizing maintenance passages and servant corridors, I remember from years of navigating the Dark City as a rack. My modified form attracts attention when glimpsed. So, unlike the standard anatomies of either Dark Eldar or their slaves, we move quickly enough to prevent close examination. Kel leads with his unique temporal perception, identifying patrol patterns and security measures with uncanny accuracy. His desynchronization allows him to perceive dangers before they fully manifest, guiding us away from threats moments before they appear. We reach the outer perimeter of the slave pens. The familiar sounds of suffering drift from within, the raw material that feeds the Dark Eldar's eternal hunger. Somewhere inside, my earlier self awaits the transformation that will turn a human captive into a specialized tool of the Himanuli. The webway access point is located in the processing chamber, I recall, used to transport new captures directly to designated covens or cabals. Correct, Kel confirms. and temporarily vulnerable during this specific temporal window before certain security protocols were implemented following an escape incident that occurs 3 days from this point in the timeline. We infiltrate the slave pen complex, moving against the flow of normal processing. The Dark Eldar guards are vigilant, but focus primarily on preventing escape from within, rather than infiltration from without. Our movements, guided by Kel's temporal perception and my knowledge of procedures, avoid direct confrontation. In the central processing chamber, newly captured slaves are sorted according to physical condition, psychological profile, and potential value to various factions within Commorragh. The webway access point dominates the far wall, currently inactive, but humming with potential energy. We must activate the portal without alerting security systems. I observe the protocols are less sophisticated in this timeline, but still formidable. Distraction required. Kel agrees. The processing system can be overloaded temporarily, creating confusion that masks our portal activation. Working together, we access a control node in the chamber's periphery. My technical knowledge combined with Kel's ability to perceive system vulnerabilities across temporal states allows us to introduce a controlled cascade failure similar to, but smaller than the one that affected Commorragh during the disjunction. Alarms sound. Lighting fluctuates. Containment fields around particularly valuable specimens destabilize briefly. The Dark Eldar guards respond with practiced efficiency, but the multiple simultaneous failures divide their attention effectively. Now Kel urges the webway access to be activated with minimal security during system reset. We move quickly to the portal controls, initiating activation sequence while the guards focus on containing the more visible disruptions. The gateway pulses to life, its surface rippling with the familiar energies of webway transition, but lacking the temporal distortions of our earlier portal. The path I perceive leads initially to a secondary junction, then branches to multiple exit points, Kel explains rapidly. One connects to a region of space the Imperium designates Ultima Segmentum, another to the edges of territory claimed by the Toe, a third to an anomalous region where reality blends with the immaterium in stable configuration. The third option I decided immediately. Imperial space means execution as xenos abomination. Tau territory means examination and likely containment as biological curiosity. The anomalous region contains its own dangers. Kel cautions. Reality operates according to different principles there, but possibilities exist that conventional space denies. Possibilities are all we require. Adaptation continues beyond known parameters. The guards notice our unauthorized portal activation. They move to intercept. Splinter weapons raised, faces masks of predatory hunger, but they are too late. The gateway stabilizes, showing glimpses of a reality unlike either Imperial space or Commorragh, colors that should not exist, geometries that defy conventional physics, a realm where the rigid boundaries between materium and immaterium blur into something new. As we prepare to step through, I glimpse movement in the peripheral chamber where new captives await processing. Among the huddled humans, one figure catches my attention, a younger man, face still bearing the wounds of recent capture, eyes burning with defiance not yet extinguished by the Dark Eldar's methodical cruelty. My earlier self, the human eye, was before transformation into a rack. Our eyes meet briefly across the chamber, an impossible moment of recognition that should create paradox, yet somehow stabilizes rather than disrupts. In his eyes, I see not just fear and confusion, but a flicker of something else. Understanding, perhaps, or the first calculation that will eventually lead to survival through adaptation. Then we are through the portal, leaving Commorragh behind as splinter fire dissipates against the closing gateway. The webway transition carries us first to the junction Kel described, then along the branch leading to the anomalous region where reality operates according to different rules. We emerge into a landscape that defies conventional description. Not quite material space, not quite the immaterium, but a stable blend of both colors with physical texture. Sounds visible as patterns in the air. Gravity that responds to consciousness as much as mass. The anomaly exists in multiple states simultaneously. Kell observes his temporal desynchronization, seeming to stabilize rather than deteriorate in this environment, material and immaterial, past and present, defined and potential. I survey our new surroundings, calculating possibilities with the enhanced cognitive capacity my modifications provide. Not freedom in any absolute sense, not escape to some idealized existence without constraint or danger, but a realm of new parameters, new rules to learn, new ways to adapt. What now, I ask, not with uncertainty, but with genuine curiosity about Kell's perception of our options. Evolution continues, he responds simply, as it always has, as it always will. Not linear progression, but exploration of possibility space. In this realm, the rigid definitions that constrained us in Commorragh become fluid. Identity becomes mutable by choice rather than by force. I consider this perspective. The modifications that make me what I am now cannot be simply reversed. The neural enhancements, the physical alterations, the cognitive reconfiguration all remain. But in this realm where reality itself responds to consciousness, perhaps they become tools rather than chains, resources for continued adaptation rather than markers of enforced servitude. We are not what we were. I acknowledge neither human nor Dark Eldar nor simple Rakh. But in this space between definitions, perhaps that indeterminacy becomes advantage rather than limitation. Precisely, Kell agrees. The Dark Eldar taught us through pain that identity is mutable. Here we continue that lesson, but under our own direction rather than theirs. The landscape shifts around us, responding to our consciousness, creating structures that reflect our thoughts and intentions. Not solid architecture like the cruel spires of Commorragh, but flowing configurations of matter and energy that provide shelter and resources according to need. I sense other presences in this realm. Not human, not Eldar, not any recognized species, but entities that exist comfortably in this blended state of reality. Some notice our arrival with curiosity rather than hostility. Others maintain distance, observing, calculating, as I would in their position. A complex ecosystem I observe, new rules to learn, new hierarchies to navigate. Yes, Kell confirms. But fundamentally different from Commorragh, predation exists here as it does throughout reality, but not a sole organizing principle. Symbiosis as well, mutual evolution, possibilities beyond simple dominance and submission. I feel my consciousness expanding to encompass these new parameters. The neural enhancements designed for service in the Homonuli laboratories adapt to processing unfamiliar sensory information, conceptualizing patterns beyond standard material physics. Not freedom as I might have imagined it in my earliest days of captivity. Not a simple return to humanity, which was never possible after the modifications that transformed me, but something else. Something new, a third path beyond simple captivity or impossible restoration. Adaptation continues. I agree, echoing Kell's earlier statement, evolution beyond the limitations imposed by others. The anomalous realm shifts around us, responding to this decision, creating pathways deeper into its blended reality. Kell's temporal desynchronization stabilizes further, finding equilibrium in an environment where time itself operates differently than in conventional space. Together, we move forward into this new existence, not escaping the past, which remains part of us in the modifications to our bodies and minds. Not forgetting the cruel lessons of Commorragh, which taught us both the mutable nature of identity and the calculation necessary for survival in hostile environments, but transforming those lessons, redirecting the tools forced upon us toward purposes of our own choosing. Finding in the space between defined states the possibility of self-determination despite the limitations we carry. The Dark Eldar of Commorragh exist in perpetual hunger, feeding on suffering to postpone the inevitable consumption of their souls by she who thirsts. Their entire society functions as an elaborate system of predation, where cruelty is both currency and salvation, where mercy is the one act no Dark Eldar can afford. We carry the marks of that society. Kell and I, the physical modifications, the neural conditioning, the calculated approach to existence that prioritizes survival above conventional morality. We cannot simply erase these aspects of ourselves and cannot return to some idealized state of innocence that existed before our capture and transformation. But in this realm, between defined states where reality responds to consciousness as much as consciousness responds to reality, perhaps we can evolve into something neither our original selves nor our captives anticipated. Neither fully human, nor Dark Eldar, nor simple Rakh, but something that incorporates elements of each while transcending their limitations. The anomalous landscape continues to shift around us as we move deeper into its blended reality. Colors with texture, sounds with visible patterns, gravity responsive to intention, a realm of possibility rather than rigid definition. And in this space between states, adaptation continues, evolution beyond imposed constraints. The lesson of Commorragh transformed from a tool of oppression to a means of liberation. Not freedom from limitation, which exists nowhere in reality, but freedom to choose which limitations define us. The twisted life I experienced among the Dark Eldar becomes not merely trauma to be escaped, but knowledge to be repurposed. The cruel efficiency of their predation, the calculated application of pain as both control and currency, the mutable nature of identity under sufficient pressure. All lessons that remain valuable even as I reject the purposes toward which they were originally directed. Kell walks beside me, his temporal perception now an advantage rather than disability, in this environment where time itself operates differently than in conventional space. Together we represent something new, not victims who escaped, not tools that broke programming, but conscious agents who carry the mark of our experiences while choosing our own path forward. The dark city of Commorragh continues its eternal feast. Predators and prey locked in cycles of cruelty that sustain their existence against the soul hunger of Slaanesh. The disjunction reshapes its webway connections according to plans set in motion millennia ago, creating new configurations of power and vulnerability for the endless game of predation to continue. But we are no longer pieces on that board, no longer bound by its rules or defined by its hierarchies. In this anomalous realm between states, we begin a different kind of existence, not utopian, not without danger or constraint, but self-directed in a way that Commorragh would never permit. Adaptation continues. Evolution persists. The twisted life among the Dark Eldar becomes not the end of my story, but a chapter within it. A period of transformation that, while forced upon me through cruelty and pain, provided tools that now serve my own purposes rather than theirs. The flesh remembers what the mind forgets. But in this space between defined states, both flesh and mind evolve beyond their original programming, becoming something neither fully human nor Dark Eldar, but uniquely adapted to navigate the boundaries between realities. And in that unique adaptation, perhaps a form of freedom exists after all.